I think A Tale of Our Time is something which grapples with any kind of modern kind of existential problems that we're having. So it could be something political, it could be warfare, economic, it could be this situation that we're in, like late stage capitalism, and anything which grapples with the kind of fundamental philosophical issues. So exploration of like what is happiness or what is humanity. And I think perhaps our relationship to happiness, if it's maybe explored through like consumerism, would be something that is a tale of our time.
And welcome to Tales of Our Times. This is a show that discusses the stories that move us, what makes them so meaningful, and why others could or should find meaning in them as well. This is not a spoiler-free show, so bear that in mind as you continue to listen. We tackle movies, books, podcasts, and more. Where there's a story, there's a reason to read. I'm your host, Amanda Stevens, and joining me today is a voice you heard only briefly. It's the amazing Eloise Phillips. Welcome back, Eloise.
Thank you. Thank you for having me again.
Thanks for coming back on the show, especially like you had such a very brief taste. I was really interested to find out what more of your media background was. So thanks for coming on.
No problem.
Do you want to introduce yourself in case someone didn't listen to that special format episode?
Yeah, of course. So I'm Eloise Phillips. I'm from the UK and I've been in Taiwan for almost 4 years actually, and I've just joined here at Radio Taiwan International, and before I was studying anthropology, and before that philosophy, and literature.
It shows in your introduction.
yeah So I'm just enjoying my time. Just moved to Taipei and loving life.
Excellent. Well, thank you for coming back. So some people may have heard you already on the news if you're a regular listener. So what story have you brought for us today?
So today I'm going to be talking about The Overstory by Richard Powers.
I love that name.
Yes, it's very indicative of the structure of the narrative itself, but it's also, I should say it's a narrative about trees primarily, and so the overstory. Yeah, exactly.
So
it literally follows the growth of a tree, and so it actually, each section is divided into like roots, branches, crowns, seeds, like this, and it unfolds in such a dramatic and just heartwarming and
Oh my God, wait, that sounds so cool. Okay, so let me ask you just right before we get into the summary, that sort of feels like it answers my typical first question, which is like, is there anything you think we need to know about this? It's tree themed down to the way that it is organized.
Yes, and also, to be honest, it's a narrative that's from the perspective of trees, even though it centers on different human narratives. So you've got, I think, about 9 protagonists in there that all basically their storylines all come together at some point, and it's just trying to show us that we're all interconnected, and especially with trees.
Wow, I'm interested to find out about it.
Yeah, since all this scientific data came out about trees and the fact that they live in like communities and that they communicate with one another and they send signals through the mycelium and all of this, I feel like, it's really expanded into like fiction as well. Or actually, this book itself is based on all of that scientific evidence. So I think there was one called the Hidden Life of Trees.
I've heard of that one.
Yes.
Yeah.
So actually, one of the characters in the Overstory, she is based on this like scientific figure, because it's actually an exploration of, I'm going to say how to save trees and nature and the environment from lots of different perspectives, and one of those being a scientific one. I won't talk about the ending yet.
Well, I was just going to say, I have like forced you by accident into a position to talk about the summary without summarizing it. So like, why don't you just like skip ahead and get to that? So why don't you give us a summary of what happens in The Overstory?
Well, it's a very long book and it's very convoluted in many ways because of the like separate narratives which then come together. But basically, the narrative spans decades, and it begins with a man who brings seeds from New York to Iowa, and this one stands strong and manages to survive, and it becomes the center of this kind of artistic project over the decades from the mid 1800s through generations right down to the great grandson. They photograph this tree, showing its growth over time, and it becomes a symbol of the sentience of trees. Even though they don't move on the same timeline as as us, they are still very much alive. And so this great grandson is an artist, and so later he comes into contact with another one of the characters. Olivia is a student who becomes a radical eco-activist. So actually much of the narrative is centered on activism and the troubling issues with
environmentalism, I have to imagine,
violence and everything which occurs. And so she basically has a mystical experience after taking drugs and then getting electrocuted, and she sees these beings of light which guide her towards abandoning her studies and to joining the activist group which will save the trees. And then we also have a daughter of a Chinese immigrant who's a successful engineer, but then she finds purpose through activism because her immigrant father ends up committing suicide under a mulberry tree, so it takes on this significance. We also have a Vietnam vet who basically is saved by a tree when he falls out of a plane and is caught by the tree. And so then he becomes a tree planter and then also goes into activism. Then we have also a PhD student who studies the psychology of protesters and then becomes one himself. Then we have the scientist who I mentioned.
The one who basically writes The Secret Life of
Exactly.
Trees.
And then we also have a game developer who creates virtual worlds. So he can't find meaning in just developing your usual
He's looking for something out of the box.
Yeah. So he has this kind of experience in the university garden with these trees, and then he ends up creating worlds where people basically try to save the ecosystems. And we also have a couple as well whose lives are tied to this giant chestnut tree, and they end up finding meaning through just planting their small garden and watching it grow in amidst all of their other struggles.
Right. The garden becomes sort of like an anchor for their relationship and the things that come in and out of it.
Exactly.
Okay.
So
I see
then,
what you mean about it being very convoluted and long.
Very, very, but it never gets boring. This is the thing, the lyrical prose, the way the characters are developed, and then the how clever it is how they eventually overlap, and then they come into this crisis.
Well, let's get into that. What is the crisis that drives them all together?
Well, so it's basically centered around this activism group. They all go to California to save the redwoods, right? And one of the main protagonists, let's say Olivia, who was
she was the first, she was the radical activist that you mentioned.
So she ends up living in the top of the tree for a year to prevent them from cutting it down. But it all goes wrong, and this beautiful hundreds of years old tree ends up getting cut down. And so in the end they decide to do this one last act of arson, which this is where the spoiler comes in.
So if this sounds too interesting and you don't want to hear this part, skip ahead.
So basically Olivia ends up dying in an explosion.
Oh my God, sorry. I was so surprised.
In so much shock.
I was so surprised. I dropped my pen.
Wait until you read it. You'll be throwing things all over the place.
Okay.
But
in an explosion?
Yes.
To set the forest on fire?
Well, it was to set, I think, the deforestation...
ideally the equipment, I have to imagine, not actually the forest.
Yeah, exactly. And they end up covering up her murder. Well,
Oh, yeah, of course.
And it follows how they live with the guilt, and then
each of the other characters.
To the point where in the end, the Vietnam vet, he can't deal with it anymore, and he writes it all in a journal, and that gets discovered, and then he and one other person, I think, end up taking the flak and going to prison for it. And but amongst all of this, trees are it's trying to get away from a human-centric kind of view of the world, right? So I think the most interesting thing is that Olivia, she died for this cause. She said, we're not saving the trees, we're saving humanity, because actually all of this that we're doing to the planet, it's humanity which is going to end up
harmed the most,
extinct or whatever.
Yeah.
It is not the trees. And that echoes Richard Powell's, the author's sentiment that this is not a human world, it is a world of trees, and humans have only just arrived. And we kind of have this arrogance where we think we can just extract trees as this resource, and we don't recognize their sentience, their aliveness. So
that's kind of where it ends, it sounds like. On this thesis statement, basically.
Basically.
That is very interesting. And I feel like something that I feel like is missing from the summary, but I feel like would be impossible to get through without reading the book, is you put a really big importance at the beginning that none of this is from a human perspective. So we're seeing all of this from the perspective of, I assume, different trees.
Yes. I mean, obviously the narratives themselves are
it's about people,
and but it's about their relationships to the natural world. So we see it in so many different forms, like the game developer, the scientist, the spiritual side, the academic, so actually it's showing how we are all interconnected with nature and with each other as well,
right? Sort of how it forms a larger net of interconnectedness.
Exactly. Right. And if we are ever going to kind of, I don't know if we can extract ourselves from this problem that we've found ourselves in, but if we are ever to, there's not one single answer. It's not saying that,
there's not
activism
one
is the key. We have to work together and
Well, so let's move on to, is that sort of what made the book meaningful to you, or was there another message? Because it sounds just on the surface like that sort of really deeply resonated with you.
Definitely. I think in this era, in this society at the moment, I always feel so powerless. You hear a lot of the issues and problems that we're facing.
Especially when it comes to the environment. It can feel so big.
It's so big, so overwhelming, and you think all of these international corporations, all the things they're doing, and how do you influence that? Do you become this eco warrior, this eco terrorist?
Do you become an Olivia?
Or do you go down the scientific route? But I don't think science can save us alone, because I think what we need is narrative and story. That's what makes us human.
Sort of that connection, right?
Exactly.
It feels like, if I may be so bold, you mentioned earlier that the book sort of implies, or even says directly, that none of these people's singular approach would be enough, right? The scientist, the artist, the activist, even the individual gardeners, but the stories and their personal connection to the natural world and the way that brought them together, that it was sort of that story that was what moved them, and maybe even what is necessary to move everybody else. Not only that, but a united effort.
Exactly, moving people to action. Because if you don't understand the importance of nature, then why would you do anything to protect it?
Well, we talk about this a lot on my other show that's about news and politics, but sort of that idea of if you don't feel connected to something, then you don't feel the importance of losing it.
Exactly.
Right? So it doesn't have any value to you unless somebody can demonstrate or create a personal connection. You're going to have really different responses to that.
Exactly. And I think, for me, I've also struggled with do I choose academia and science and follow this kind of strain of thought, or the more holistic kind of mystical, but I think it requires a marriage of the two, especially in relation to my studies, for example, is about indigenous culture, and a lot of the traditional ecological knowledge past was just brushed off as
right.
It doesn't have any space or like standing in how we know the world now, but it's slowly coming back, and it's how we can reconcile that with the clinical scientific knowledge, how we can bring those together.
So what do you think makes this a tale of our time, and is it related to what you were just talking about like sort of the demonstrable ways in which people can be related to nature?
I think because the issues we're facing with climate change, everything, a tale of our time has to include this. It's like such a threat to humanity, and we're not taking it seriously enough at all. And I think this book showcases that. It also breaks the mold of this like anthropocentric view that we're the highest beings in this world, when it's not our world. It's like Richard Powell said, it's a tree's world that we've arrived in. So he brings that to the forefront, which is definitely makes it a tale of our time, and offers, not a solution as such, but offers us like the suggestion, or like at least the hope that perhaps, considering multiple perspectives and multiple ways in which we can like recognize the aliveness of nature that we've been sucking the life out of for decades, centuries,
for such a long time.
Well, yeah, exactly. I can't even count. So it's a must read to me. And
very entertaining, it sounds like.
Yes.
It almost sounds to me like you're describing sort of like another form of the little blue dot effect. Do you know that? It's like basically when people go to space and they see how small the Earth is and compared to like all the dark nothingness that surrounds it. It sort of gives you this like spiritual moment of like, oh, that's our home. And like we have to take care of it. Like this is everything to us.
Yeah.
But without this, like what do we even have?
Exactly.
And it feels like another way to do that, right? Looking at like your lifetime compared to a tree's, but then trying to see that played out over such a long scheme. That's like, how can you compare your lifetime to like that of a tree, if a tree could talk to you and tell you the things that it's seen, then compared to like how many of those exist, how many of those narratives would be out there and exist.
Exactly.
What an interesting book.
Really,
I don't think I've ever heard of a book like this before.
Yeah, no, it surprised me actually. I didn't know what to expect before I read it, and it was recommended to me by a very good friend, and I'm so glad that I took it on. It is long, but it's definitely worth the time.
You surprised me at every turn. Clearly. the pen dropping and explosion at the end.
Well, I've barely even touched the surface as well. Like my kind of summary is missed.
This is a very brief overview.
Yeah. Incredibly brief.
So then if you were to give the Overstory, also a really fitting name, thinking about it, we just briefly gave this a little look in. But if you were to give the Overstory a one-phrase subtitle of your very own, what would that be?
I don't know if this would work or not, but something along the lines of like trees as sentient witnesses to our era's destruction. Oh, it's not one phrase.
The arboreal witnesses of our era's destruction. I left out sentient, but I feel like
kind of
I feel like witness sort of implies that. Is that okay with you?
Yeah.
The arboreal witnesses of our era's destruction. Wow. Dang. Eloise, thanks for coming on my show and telling me about this book.
No problem.
Wow.
Thank you for having me. I really wanted to do justice to this book. And I mean, I don't think you can unless you just read it. So
yeah, it sounds like it's definitely one that like is much more of an experience to read.
Definitely.
And sort of like being condensed down into a summary, even if it were like a very detailed one, couldn't do it justice.
Not at all.
Yeah.
But if you want to reshape your like relationship to trees and
nature,
go in with an open heart, definitely.
Oh my God. Well, thank you so much for coming on.
No problem.
Thank you to all of you out there for listening. This has been Tales of Our Time on Radio Taiwan International. I was your host, Amanda Stevens, with today's guest and my new coworker, Eloise Phillips. And we were talking about Richard Powers' The Overstory, the arboreal witnesses of our era's destruction, a tale of our time. We'll see you next time.
Catch the latest RTI news, programs, previews, and more on our website, rti.org.tw. That's rti.org.tw.